Do you want to learn how to get healthy, perform at your best, and create body composition changes that last? In this podcast, we're going to talk about all things fitness, nutrition, health, and mindset. You're going to learn how to create real results, and most importantly, how to maintain those results in the long run. I'm Johan.
I'm Kristine,
and you're listening to Talking Nutrition. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Talking Nutrition. Today's episode 16, where we're going to talk about binge eating, food restriction, intermittent fasting, and we're actually going to open up a little bit more now with some personal experiences about, trying, very restrictive protocols or doing some time restricted feeding. But we'll get into that in a sec. So as always, if you don't yet, make sure to follow us. Make sure to leave a review or a rating. It helps us a whole ton. Today, I want to start with a little story of myself, which I recently brought up, where I would eat a whole jar of peanut butter with a pack of rice crackers, which ended up being about 3,000 plus calories. I looked it up, actually. And without recapping the whole thing, like I would work late, get up early, go to CrossFit, do just about 2 hours of training there. So like quite a bit of training, I would have coffee, waited for work, and then kind of like that was my day, and repeat. So what would happen was, sure, I had some breakfast, and then I had like a protein shake after, training. By the time it was like 4 p.m., I had no food in my system, or very little at least, even though I was doing a lot of training. So of course the cravings started to kick in, and then I would go to the store, binge on like 3,000 calories, have a whole jar of peanut butter, and go about my evening. That was more than my maintenance calories in like one sitting, So even though I actually wanted to, so I was trying to like be healthy then, train and all that stuff. I was taking care of myself, or I thought so at least. Even though I was doing a lot of training, I was not losing weight, because just from that one sitting, I would already get to my maintenance, and then everything else during the day was like extra, And that's exactly what happens when people go into protocols like intermittent fasting, where there's very little education on like how much you're supposed to eat or what you should eat, or things like low carb, where you just focus on leaving carbs out, right? Or leaving, any processed foods out, or whatever it might be. A lot of times that just backfires. And I had a similar experience with intermittent fasting, where I would not eat, for X amount of time. I would actually do CrossFit fasted, which is fucking terrible. Feel like crap. And then as soon as I could eat, it was like just huge, like pile of food, And it really starts to create like a weird relationship with food and just food amounts and food choices. And I think we have to like remove ourselves from that a little bit and focus less on like leaving stuff out, right? And focus less on, I cannot eat after whatever time, but focus more on doing more of the good stuff, right? But we'll get to that. So I think you want to share something about your gut health journey from a couple of years ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you said there, where you had this weird relationship with food, but didn't even realize it. So that was me in the beginning of my CrossFit career. So I was doing things like the zone. I did eventually get into macro tracking, but when I was doing that when I was eating like that, what I would do is I would eat perfect, throughout the whole week, and like super clean. And then I would have one day, I think I've talked about this before, potentially on here, but I'd have one day where it would be my cheat day. And all week I would basically make a list of what I wanted on my cheat day or my cheat meal. And I would just go crazy. And I wasn't like trying to diet or anything at this time. Like I was purely focused on performance, but I didn't realize what was happening with my relationship with food until like I started to get a little bit more knowledgeable. Also that doing that, I would literally feel like crap for like 2-3 days after, because I was just intaking like all these super highly processed foods. Like I would literally just jump. I was going from like, I would go to like Taco Bell, like I would jump fast food restaurants. And then I would even like go pick up like donuts and chips. And I would just do this all day long. And it wasn't until I just was like, this is crazy. Like, I realized it. I don't even remember what made me realize it. But then I started to like sprinkle, right, the fun foods throughout my week versus having this like one massive big day. And that's really when that changed things for me. But when I was in it, I didn't realize how messed up that really was, right? Until I was out of it. So now, since then, I mean, when I was in that, like, I don't look back and say, I had this really poor relationship with food because I had bad body image, or, I was trying to like fulfill something. It was just, that's what I thought you did, right? I thought there was like massive cheat days and whatever. So after that, like I would say a very, very solid relationship with food from that time, which was like, I think that was like 2014. That was when I was doing the big binging and stuff. Up until a couple of years ago, like 2021, maybe 2020. Very, very solid relationship with food. No issues there at all. And I have not shared this with anybody. So other than Eric and a couple, like, I think a couple other people, but I think it's important for me to share because it wraps into what we're talking about today. So a lot of people have followed my gut health journey. I have a lot of gut health issues from just like my past, surgeries, overtraining, all that stuff. So I hired a specialist to help me, and she was great. Like I'm not talking down on her in terms of this, but what I went through, like these protocols, really started to impact my relationship with food. So I went through, it was a 3-week detox, and it was very noticeable difference in what I look like. Like everyone was commenting on it. But I was a byproduct of the detox. I wasn't doing it for improvements in my body composition. I was doing it to start the process of my gut health journey. And this detox was for 3 weeks, and the first 2 days you fasted. So all I got on those 2 days was 4 shakes. So I think it was like 500 calories for the day. Okay. And then after that, the remaining of the week, you'd have a morning shake, you'd have a lunch, afternoon shake, and dinner. But it was very restrictive, right? In the sense of like you could only eat X, Y, Z. There was a list of foods, but zero processed, like nothing. And this is, when you're going through gut health protocols, this is the type of stuff that you have to do, right? You need to do. The protocols are going to be restrictive, and they're only meant to be temporary, right? But this was the one time in my life that I'm like, oh my gosh, like when I finished, I had to be very careful with myself to not start to binge on certain foods. Like I really felt the desire very strongly to binge. And I'm a person with a good relationship with food. So I could not even imagine someone going through that, that didn't have a good relationship with food or was already dealing with, stuff ahead of doing this. And one thing I was doing, and I bet you any money, so many people can relate to this. People who do that, that restrict low carb or go low carb, intermittent fasting, carnivore. when in reality, they don't like actually want to do these things. Right. So this is like, I was on Instagram, I mean, on the internet in general, and just searching all of these recipes and desserts and stuff that I was going to make following my protocols. And like, I was so food focused. I'm like, this is really bad. Like, this is really bad. And so it really gave me a look into, because I had never like overly restricted myself doing diets because I was always performance based, but it really gave me a look into how people feel when they are doing stuff like this, right? And it's not, sometimes it's not because you have a poor relationship with food, it's just the way that you're choosing to do a, lose fat, right? It's the diet you're choosing that's leading to that poor relationship with food or making things unsustainable, right? Because I think a lot of people, they get down on themselves too, and they think, oh, I just don't have the discipline, I can't do this, and blah 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 blah. But really, it's not that. It's that what you're doing is just super unsustainable for you, and very very hard to adhere to, right? So I think that I wanted to share that, because I think it's relatable to people, but also just because it showed me, what restricting, and it's crazy because like I wasn't restricting from a body image standpoint, so it would be like tenfold for people in that situation. So yeah, I mean, I'm out of it now, but it took a little bit for me to essentially recover from feeling like that.
Thing is too, like people don't even do that on purpose, right? They don't know.
Right.
It's not even your fault if you go online and you find,
No.
or you literally you Google, how do I lose weight or something, like how do I do this? And
Yeah.
you find whatever it might be, low carb, etc. That's the stuff you find. Low carb, intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
keto, all that shit. And I'm not even like saying that all those tools are bad. And let's be honest, hey, a lot of times we have to take people into a deficit. We're going lower carb because we have to cut calories from somewhere, And if fats are already low, then we might be on like a lower-ish carb protocol for a little bit. But that's not because carbs are bad. It's just because we need to lower calories. But anyway, it's not your fault. That's what I'm trying to say. It's almost like these protocols are designed for you to fail, which is also really not the case. But there needs to be more education. And that's where, we come back to coaching again. Like, that's where we can help you. That's where a coach can help you, because we can actually walk you through, hey, this is how shit works. This is what we can figure out, like how we can get you to lose fat, you to get healthy,
Right.
But I feel like there's there's something wrong there, like from the very start, because the principles are not being taught,
Mm-hmm.
People think, it's carbs. People think it's sugar. People think, hey, it must be fats, and it's just not the case.
Right.
And I also wanted to go back to detoxes. Like the detox that you did was very different than the shit that you see online.
Yes.
Right? I wanted to bring this up because people see this online a lot too. And I'm sure that when you look up weight loss, you'll find a detox tea or detox this and that. That's something very different, right? There are detox supplements or protocols out there that are just money makers that just make you feel like shit. What Kristine did was work with a gut health professional who knew what they were doing.
Yes.
Right? And you said it already, like that's not a lifestyle change kind of thing. That's okay. We have to be very precise here, very restrictive in that case, because there is a specific condition that you want to take care of.
Right.
And that goes beyond macros and calories and general like fat loss stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
You lost fat as a byproduct. But those restrictive approaches there are there for a different purpose. So I don't want people to think, oh, detox, that's what I got to do because Kristine lost a lot of weight.
Right.
Just kind of just in case, because you see a lot of like
totally.
detox shit
online.
Well,
when I went through that and people saw the drastic change, everyone wanted to know exactly what I did. I was like, I am not telling you. Like, no way.
Because they'll do it.
Yeah. And it'll just destroy someone. Because the thing is they'll do it, they'll lose the weight, they'll gain it back, then they'll try and do it again, and it'll just be this cycle, right? Because it's not sustainable. It's not meant to be.
No, it's not meant to be sustainable.
Yeah.
It's a tool,
Yeah.
But that's why I really like that video, and let's actually get into that, because exactly that, right? Low carb, intermittent fasting, those protocols, they focus on a certain food, a certain time, with the purpose of weight loss. Now, there was a new study that looked into that and the relationship between low carb, intermittent fasting, and then the risk of binge eating.
So with this study, we'll link it below, and we'll also link the video because I just love Layne. I like Layne. I mean, you either love him or you hate him, but I know that I can tell he's like a how do you explain him? He's just straight up, but he also has compassion. He cares a lot. So anyways, watch the video. It's a good video, but I'm going to touch on a lot of stuff he talks about. So the video, or the study, recent 2022 study, examining people that weren't dieting, people doing low carb, and then people doing low carb with intermittent fasting. But they excluded people that were just doing intermittent fasting. They also, in terms of that, they were examining their beliefs around food, their cravings, the inclination for them to binge eat or have eating disorders, but they excluded people already diagnosed with eating disorders. So,
which is really good. Like the setup is very solid.
Yes. So the low carb diet was 85% women. Okay. The low carb plus intermittent fasting was 98% women. And vast majority had normal BMI and normal BMI and normal body weight. That's what I meant to put there. So he goes into talking about how much this highlights and how much emphasis society puts on women's bodies and how pressured we feel to look a certain way. But I will add to this, men are the same. Okay. Like, yes, there wasn't a lot of men necessarily in this study, and I think that's okay because a lot of studies are done on men. We know that. But men deal with the same issues as women in terms of this. So, in the low,
can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I was thinking right there because there's a good chance too that dudes also don't necessarily want to be involved in a study like this to admit, that they want to lose weight. I think there's a thing there as well where dudes, there's plenty of guys struggling with that, but they won't necessarily kind of like talk about it, or share that with someone or look for help. Because I think that's probably like part of it too. But yeah, you're definitely right. Like there's a lot of pressure on women, and exactly how Layne said in that video, like we have, as a society, we have to fucking do better because there's a lot of pressure on women. It's not a good thing.
Big time.
Sorry. Go ahead.
You're good. So in the low carb group, 40% had significant levels of binge eating. So remember, these people didn't have necessarily disordered eating prior to going into this, right? So in the low carb group, 40% had significant levels of binge eating. The no diet group had 13%. So that's a pretty big
Three
difference.
times as much. Like, that's nuts.
Yes.
I feel like we have to repeat that again.
Yeah.
In the
So,
low carb group,
yeah.
40%, like 40% at significant levels of binge eating. No diet group, that was 13%. That's a huge difference.
And then he goes into talking about the types of food they were binging on were things like bread and pasta. And those exact foods they identified as like bad or they wanted to avoid were the exact foods they were binging on. So it's, how did he put it? These like really hard food rules, like, and having, this mentality of like good or bad foods, right? Those are literally the exact foods these people are binging on, right? Because of those, hard food rules. Then he said higher levels of food cravings for things like chocolate, sub-analysis of those doing low carb plus intermittent fasting saw even greater risk of binge eating than the low carb group. So the low carb plus intermittent fasting was worse than just the low carb group. And remember, low carb was at 40%, and then the no diet was at 13%. So I need to go into the actual study, and I would be interested to see this percentage. So this is something straight from the study. So it says dieters showed higher levels of binge eating, food cravings, cognitive restraint toward carbohydrates when compared to non-dieters. The association of low carb and intermittent fasting was related to an increase in disordered eating, especially binge eating and food cravings, specifically lack of control, thoughts of preoccupation with food, and guilt from cravings and or for giving into them. These results provide evidence that restrictive carbohydrate diets and intermittent fasting may increase cognitive restraint and consequently food cravings. And another thing that he pointed out was that, oftentimes when someone's going like low carb or they're doing like intermittent fasting or they're like keto or carnivore and they're in these groups and they're part of a community or they identify with these types of diets, the guilt and the shame when they actually eat the carbs or they eat outside of the fasting window is tenfold, like worse tenfold, because now it's part of their identity. Now they're letting like other people down, right? So that's another really big part of it.
And that plays into feeling like a failure again, even though it's not even your fault, right?
One of the last things he said that really stuck out to me was, you can choose to do these things. So if you do low carb, if you do intermittent fasting, understand that it's a form of like dietary restriction, right? Like you're choosing to do it because maybe it feels easier for you or it's more sustainable for you versus I'm doing this because I fear carbs or I think carbs are going to make me fat, because you are quite literally setting yourself up for failure or like disordered eating, right? Because no food in isolation, so no carbs, no fats, candy, whatever you want to, whatever you're fearing, none of those foods in isolation are making you fat, right? It's the quantity, how much you're having. So again, like trying to get away from the mentality and having these like really hard food rules can help immensely. I mean, I know it's way easier said than done, obviously. But that's what's causing, a lot of these issues.
Yeah. And I swear, like 9 out of 10 times when someone signs up for coaching, they write out what they've done in the past. It's like a combination of all of them, right? I tried keto and low carb and intermittent fasting, but here they are coming to me for a fat loss goal, or to you in this case, like those approaches can work, definitely, but they usually don't.
I feel like we've said this so many times on here, but it's
yeah, but whatever. It's also the one thing that so many people struggle with,
Yeah, totally.
So it's okay to bring it up again, because that's exactly why people keep spinning their wheels. Is those restrictive approaches.
If you're doing keto or carnivore and you're having binges on a bunch of carbohydrates, the diet is not working. The diet is not working. No. I have had many clients come to me I know I've talked about this, keto, carnivore.
No, it's all good.
And they're binging. This is not working for you, clearly. Right? So people like, I don't know if they can't like see that, right? But they just want to keep doing it. Again, maybe it's because it's part of their identity. They want to say they're doing carnivore. It works for a short period of time. But if you're continuously having to go back to this diet because you ended up binging or you gained all the weight back, it's not working. It's not working.
I think too, and this is literally just me thinking out loud, but I think that it's also an easier thing to say. I mean, part like social media is definitely playing a huge role here with the carnivore shit. This really pissed me off last week. Side note. I saw this video. This dude's literally like, yo, you got to try this, and he starts to talk about like the molecules and this and that. And he's eating raw testicle with like a piece of butter in between.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm like, he's like, this is my favorite snack. I'm like, this is not your favorite snack. Who the fuck
are you kidding?
You're lying. This is not your favorite snack.
Holy shit.
I know.
You can see it in his face.
I know. I'm like,
it's not true. Like,
please.
Oh man, like, anyway.
That made me die. When he said this is my favorite snack, I literally threw my hands up. I was like, no.
I was like, what do you do? And then he gets into like, yeah, this will give you all the signaling molecules. I don't know, whatever he said.
Yeah, they try and sound all smart, right?
But anyway, sorry, back to my point. I feel like I have like side rants like that all the time where like, let's talk. What is that, Rose in the back? Yeah. Where you start talking about like idiots on Instagram and TikTok. No, but okay, like that does play a role into it. Like you see a lot of keto stuff, a lot of carnivore. But the thing is too, like it's easier to say, hey, I'm not going to eat bread and pasta, whatever. Because like I'm just going to cut out that group because I know it's like you barely have to think about it. Okay, that's carbs. I'm not going to eat that.
Yeah.
Food. Easy, right? Instead of putting in time, effort, patience, changing your habits, like working on your overall diet. But that's a problem too, because like you said, you have to keep going back to that diet. Sure, it can work for weight loss, but how are you going to keep it off? You don't, because you rebound and then you have to go back there again. So
right.
Anyway, it's just not the way to do it.
I think one thing that drives me a little bit crazy too is when people say that tracking macros is like obsessive and stuff like that. And then here they are cutting out whole food groups. Like both can cause issues, but I can't stand when they just like focus on one thing. And I think we've talked about this before, where like majority of my clients are tracking macros and not dieting. Like it doesn't automatically mean you're dieting.
Yeah.
Right. So anyways, I had to add that in again.
No, I think that's a really good one. And this really goes back to the same thing. It's a lack of education.
Yeah.
Because sure, I've had a lot of people who said like, hey, tracking didn't work for me, whatever. But usually they were like not eating any protein, like there's no context there, no education. They didn't know what to do. They followed the app. And since we're sharing personal stuff anyway, I remember tracking for the first time with MyFitnessPal. And these little mints, they're called like Smint.
Mm-hmm.
You know that one?
I think so.
I would track every single one of them.
Oh my gosh.
And they're like, yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it's like the thing, like one is like 1 gram.
Yeah.
I didn't know. there were like these fucking sugar-free things, you know, and I had to like track every single one of them. I had like a log of them, you know. So also there, like I also have personal experience with doing tracking wrong, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So sure, like at the end of the day, it can all be used to either teach you and get you to a good spot or hurt you. But let's try to like use stuff to learn from and not necessarily say I'm gonna do this because carbs are bad or this is bad or whatever is bad or I have to leave this out or I cannot eat from this time until then. I would say like focus on the things that you can do, right? And I know you do this as well. Like we don't focus on restriction. We add more good stuff. We add protein. We add fruit.
Right.
We add veggies, you know? There's a time and place for leaving some stuff out, you know? Let's be honest, a calorie deficit, we literally have to take calories away.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be low carb. It doesn't have to be intermittent fasting. I think there's better ways to go about it.
Same. Agreed. And the
Cool.
proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding. Sorry.
No, but you're right. You know, there's stuff that lasts long term, and there's stuff that's going to get you some very short, maybe pretty good weight loss results. But I mean, if you rebound and you gain it all back, does it really matter? I don't think so. Thank you guys for listening. As always, hit us up, follow us on Instagram, leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple, and then we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you want to help us grow the show, please make sure to leave us a 5-star rating or share this episode on your Instagram stories. Now, if at any point you feel like you need more help, you can always reach out to Kristine or myself directly via any of the links in our show notes, because we're here to help. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.